beginning of September now, and everything is still green and hot. His white hair is longish, parted down the middle, and his face droops. Alphonse is another flyer, another artist in need of a model. He offers you tea, which you never drink, but you say yes to be polite. He asks you what you study, and when you tell him, he brings you into his library and shows you a book. Have you read My Father? You shake your head. He wrote this. It's very famous. You'll probably end up reading it for class. He tells you he used to date a girl who went to your college in the 80s. Is Amarillo's still there? He asks. I'm a waitress at Amarillo's, you say. He runs a long finger down the spine of his father's book. Everything changes. We used to go there. That girl I dated became a fashion model, Vogue and all that. He's fiddling with the camera now, checking the aperture, wiping the lens. Let's go on to the deck, he says. The south side of his house is made clicks. He speaks only to tell you to change position. When it's all over, he hands you a crisp 100 and a picture. You don't look at it until you're in your room. In the photo, you're lying on your belly, propped up slightly by your arms. In the middle of the curve of your back is a giant red pimple. There are many reasons why you say yes. Most of them have to do with good manners. You have become addicted to that rush of adrenaline, the high that exists in the pale sliver of time when you can still say no. But yes is what you always say. To do otherwise is impolite. This is what you've learned. He always offers you tea. He asks you how your week has been. He likes to show you around his house he designed, all 4,000 square feet of it. He tells you he received his master's of architecture from Yale. There are framed pictures of his 2 sons, of their mother, hanging on the walls. The next time you see Alphonse, he asks to shave you, and then takes you out to lunch. He drives to a country club on the side of a hill, but it's closed, a minor embarrassment. He tells you about his years after college when he lived in Paris and Rome and London and Berlin. I bought a Porsche, he says. I drove around Europe for 2 years. You should try it. You eat outside at a small bistro. It's windy and your napkin escapes more than once. The second time this happens, he looks slightly annoyed. He asks what you like to write about. I don't really know, you say. The conversation turns to his art, his process, the recent death of his mother, models and drugs in the gallery he used to have in New York. But it's hard to pay attention to what he's saying. He wants to remove hair from your body, and you will let him. It's a quiet ride back. The horses are in the fields, their brown coats reflecting the sun. They are so close to the white fences you can see their long tails flicking away the flies. You're on your hands and knees on an expensive over-dyed rug made in Afghanistan. He is behind you with a razor, a can of Barbasol, and a small metal bowl filled with warm water. The Bach cello suites are playing on the stereo. He's gentle, first lathering you with the shaving cream in slow, rhythmic circles, then the cold snick of the razor, a metallic clang as he dips it into the water and taps it on the side of the bowl. At intervals, he uses the cloth to dab away any excess. He tells you to lie on your back, and then you watch him between your legs. You've gone way up over yourself. You're in the mirror on the wall, and you see everything. I bet your boyfriend's really going to enjoy this, he says. Your reflection laughs awkwardly, her breasts jiggle with the motion. Then she looks stern. She asks you if you really think he's shaved all his models. What if he puts his fingers inside you? She says not to worry. You never have to tell anyone. All you have to do is lie there. When he's finished, he sits back on his haunches and admires you. He says, "Lay however you'd like," and gestures towards the cushions piled on the floor. You arrange yourself and close your eyes. One of the windows is open and you feel the breeze across your skin. Why did you say yes? Your reflection is behind your eyelids now, accusing. A fly lands on your stomach and starts crawling lower. It tickles, but you cannot move to swat it away. This is what he's bought. Your stillness. He calls you the following week. I have to help my son pick out a car, he says. You will not hear from him again. It will be a relief.
I'm reading 3 poems that I wrote last fall for Julie Sheehan's Contemporary Poets class. The first is Ask Me, after William Stafford. Ask me. One late autumn day, let's walk these grounds again, when stately trees stand stark, some crooked, silhouetted by a pale golden sun, hidden mostly behind smoky skies, where mulched beds appear colorless and dead. Let's talk then, while ambling through fallow fields rigid with frost. Cultivation, I'll say, is a slug-slow thing. Who among us knows the whens and whys of catastrophe? Mangled limbs, broken hearts. What naked eye can see the origin of decay? Whose vision perceives all that has come and gone before, and the promise of life and love that still may be? What's past, what lies ahead, is locked invisibly inside each cultivar. Ceaseless, timeless, natural growth we cannot see. Ask me, could I have done differently? Yes and no. I've chosen life, naturally. That's all I know. This is An Elegant Jardiniere. One day it will be yours, said Auntie, jealously admiring an elegant jardiniere Father'd brought from France to decorate our house. It was a Christmas gift, a secret kept dear by me and my twinkle-eyed father, unwrapped that very morning, with good cheer and humor, by a happy wife and mother. One day it will be yours, said Auntie to me, soft-voiced, slant-eyed, spoiling the present altogether. Cream porcelain painted celadon green, with leaves, twining vines, flowers of fine, delicate design. Such beauty had never graced our home in rural Allen County. Of an art not known at the time to be Florentine, I loved it for the worlds it opened to me, knowing nothing then of art history or ceramic lines. Auntie's words fell like a pall upon a gift of artistry. Was my pleasure in the gift a buried curse, perverse? The thought now, decades later, sears my memory. The jardiniere is mine now, yet always it is hers, an ever-present, heart-stabbing wish. One day it will be yours. This is Cheers to writers' drafts, or any draft is a good draft. Kegs align in long high rows by cobwebbed wooden walls, while sunlight slants through darkened glass on fragrant sawdust floors. The stillness yields to fiddlin' song, to lusty laughs, lugubrious yawns, while casks are rolled and spun and tapped. The tavern jigs to life. Now stories flow longside the beer, for not only is drink poured here, but memories too are tapped and flow unplugged. Stacks of brews ferment inside the peopled tavern of my mind, from kegs of ale to lagers and stouts, from young and pale to old and stale, from sweet and light to bitter ripe. There's rich, full-bodied, properly cured, and cheap, near tasteless, raw, immature. Here's to cheers to draughts and beers of every sort and kind. All do improve, the bet is sure, with passing tastes and growing time. Thank you.
The following is an excerpt in progress from my memoir called Daisy. This was originally written in response to a prompt on an act of cruelty, and this piece is called July. It was after 1:30 in the morning. The sleep aid hadn't kicked in yet. I've been taking 1 to 2 doses just about every night since March. My cell phone was lighting up the bedroom and vibrating on the cherry surface of my nightstand. Nino's endless, unanswered text messages were continuing for a third night in a row. Each was a blinding punch to my gut that I wished would just go away if ignored. I caved. I called him, hoping to make it clear that I no longer wanted his contact. Just the idea that he was still thinking about me made me feel unhinged and exposed. "Hello?" Nino's warm, familiar voice was between a whisper and a cry. "Why do you keep messaging me?" I tried on my most sincere yet labored tone. He was nervous and groveled through the speaker, slithering to seduce me from the inside out. A few days before, he saw me driving and was desperate to know if I saw him too. Like the cosmos were reuniting a mythical pair of lost lovers on that July 4th afternoon. I disagreed. I had no idea we were on the road simultaneously, but wasn't surprised. We lived only miles apart, but hadn't seen each other since the winter. Almost every 3 weeks, like a prisoner sentenced to life is burdened by clockwork, I sensed when I received his unwanted and emotional phone calls and text messages. He ached through a list of confessions, plucking at my patience like displaced petals on a daisy. Each one was another reminder of our history. We both felt this unexplainable pull towards one another, even though we were no longer together. He heard that song on the radio we always used to sing, or remembered a favorite writer of mine when a professor brought them up in class. I'd catch a glimpse of those red shoes in my closet that Nino always liked, a pair that I tried to hide so as not to think about the night he first told me he loved me. A friend at work used the expression, "It is what it is," which Nino hated. We understood these as fate's way of preparing for the fact that we weren't supposed to be strangers yet. I heard the faint crinkle of paper through the phone. Before I could get a word in, he recited exact phrases from old poems I wrote him, which he read every night for weeks recently. He just couldn't let go of the framed picture of us from last Halloween still perched on his desk. Nino wanted me back and would do anything to win and charm me, like a cheapened carnival prize up for grabs. Back in March, I pleaded how good we were together and that it was a cruel mistake to pick some college freshman over me. She was a psychology major named Danielle. My friends clicked through her Facebook profile and tried to convince me that she looked like a 13-year-old with dull hair and no hips. I begged him to fight for us, but Nino was gray matter, washing his hands of our year-long relationship that only just now revealed its worth to him after the ultimate sign of spotting my car. He was still attached to this girlfriend, but the combination of the memory of me and these supposed signs that followed him from day to day was an unbearable anchor. I was shivering, pressing the flat glass surface of the phone hard onto my ear. I wasn't cold. The anxiety of being without him that I thought I conquered long ago returned and was erupting. My fears failed to push the crawling attraction of his tenor out of my trembling bones. "It doesn't matter if I saw you or not. You're with her. I told you I'm not competing. It's too late. Stop trying." I could never forgive him anyway, but I missed my best friend more than anything. I wished him a happy birthday for the 11th and said goodbye. Thank you.
I will be reading to you some of my poetry. Dust. I was young when I held your hand, faded with liver spots and shades of antiquity. The wrinkles multiplied, loose over the metacarpals of your hand. Breaths came as gasps, like a fish. The smell of skin powdered and papered, a frame not yet showing the shattered secrets it held inside. I taught you to believe in fairies, in the magic of pixie dust from the mimosa tree in the backyard. I sprinkled the last of the fairy queen's pixie dust over your quivering eyes. An aura of sweet pink pollen rained over the shell of your body. As you choked on your soul, the birds kept singing, the children kept laughing, the earth was not still. I closed my eyes and held your hand, hoping to breathe my life into your still form. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Hoping to breathe my life into your still form, I closed my eyes and held your hand. The birds kept singing, the children kept laughing. The earth was not still. As you choked on your soul, an aura of sweet pink pollen rained over the shell of your body. I sprinkled the last of the fairy queen's pixie dust over your quivering eyes. From the mimosa tree in the backyard, I taught you to believe in fairies and the magic of pixie dust. A frame not yet showing the shattered secrets it held inside, the smell of skin powdered and papered. Like a fish, breaths came as gasps. Loose over the metacarpals of your hand, the wrinkles multiplied. Faded with liver spots and shades of antiquity, I was young when I held your hand. Next, I will be reading to you Until Everyone Comes Home. Lost, burned by the world's guilty pleasure gold, he radiates, revealing himself nearly naked, the luster of finding new beginnings, the power of provocations were idolized. Nostalgia. I wake up most mornings and I'm back there, having grown up with the end of a doomed small town, a coming of age with a head full of what I could have done differently. Maybe I could think clearly. Hard truths. No one heard the past, a vision for ethical split decisions, and his love on the periphery, gently holding women on those empty nights. The ease and flowing style of the art of making love. If these walls could talk. Focus. An unruly man seeks out visions from a burning bush, something rather than being in the center of it all. We shouldn't care that not everyone in this world has beautiful contrast. It's about another spirited summit, trying to save everybody, or thinking about finding the garden. Found. Coming home, not just where you were born, where we walk barefoot over the red soil to the water's edge, back to comforts of home and how to be alone and discover peace of mind, the fate of spiritual survivors. Important information about the next generation. You are powerful messengers of a philosophical complaint, gently asking the children to create. In the homelands, traditional lifestyle is disappearing. Ancient civilizations, the wolf, the planet, headed for extinction.
I'll be reading an excerpt from a longer piece called Don't Look Away. Elizabeth wants to become a nurse, and her mother worries and warns her about the things she'll carry home. The pain in the faces, the crying voices, the smell of shit and vomit. Her mother worries and warns her about what will live on in her dreams. The red blood everywhere, the black eyes of the dying, the yellow skin of the sick. Her mother worries and warns her about the thin walls of her white skin and what they might let in. Her mother does not know what Elizabeth has already seen, already dreamed. Her mother does not know what Elizabeth knows. Elizabeth knows the heartache of knowing and doing nothing slowly kills, but the heartache of doing slowly heals. Look away and worry later. This is what her mother's approach to life has taught Elizabeth. Look away while your father hovers naked above you, breathing in your breath, scratching raw the soft flesh of your breasts with his unshaven chin. Look away while your husband snorts the grocery money up his nose. Look away while his fist finds your face when you ask what you and the kids will eat for dinner. Look away when the doctor tells you he's dead, that he'd been drunk and drove the car into a tree. Find something else to focus on. The brown tips of the dying spider plant hanging from the kitchen window, the dust caked on the blades of the ceiling fan, the peeling edge of the linoleum tile around the toilet, the snotty, wailing face of the child in the waiting room. Worry about money. Worry about what you'll tell your mother. Worry about the next time he drinks, but worry about it later. All along, Elizabeth has doubted the infrastructure of her mother's survival. She has felt some vague irritation. Like the princess and the pea, some tiny grain of something has been scratching at her tender, white underbelly, leaving it sore and pink. But knowing no other way to navigate her childhood, she has clung to her mother like some sort of gorgeous parasite. In her adornment, Elizabeth has been kept safe, has been fed, and has lent her mother her own beauty. But her mother isn't beautiful right now. Now that her father is dead, now that her mother's way of life has crashed into a tree, now that there is a hole torn in the fabric of their universe, Elizabeth wants out, and her mother won't let her go. Her mother has never been violent until this moment. She hits Elizabeth with every fear, doubt, and nightmare she can recall.
Thank you. This is called Atlantis. It's a short fiction piece that I kind of wrote by accident. It was certainly there, once. Right there on the street corner of Mollet and Haven. Beyond the dirt salted with shattered glass bottles, beyond the scattered burst condoms, and across the ever-whispering dead sea of golden green grass, stood a lone, unassuming building. The rampant and unkempt growths of its forsaken lot obscured its simple, untouched brick-red exterior and faded gray-tiled roof. It was clearly abandoned and out of use for some time. It was small, and it didn't look like it could possibly hold very much inside. It never seemed threatening, really. It was just there, old and unattended, sort of like it was hiding, almost playfully so. Of course, that's how I would describe it if you asked me about it now. Not that anyone would. Ask anyone what building I'm talking about, they'll probably just say, "What building?" I can't say how many times I'd walked past the shoddy little shack myself as a kid, on my way to the baseball field or down the street to Shakey's. But I can tell you that I never found out what was inside. "What's that, Mom?" I asked offhandedly one day, pointing at the building. We were just taking a family walk about town. My little sister Hannah was just 4 and still in her stroller. Next to Opie, the dog, who was tied to the other stroller, I was riding along on a new silver scooter I'd gotten for my birthday the day before. A nice breeze had been fluttering through all day. It made me sad at the time, because it reminded me that school would start again in just 12 days. As I scooted under the "Please pick up after your dog" sign along the sidewalk, I took notice of the building for the first time. It's a strange thing to remember so crisply, really. I can hardly remember my first Little League home run beyond the fact that it happened. But I suppose we keep strange little things like that from our childhood with us. They're always important, even if we can't understand why. "Oh, that used to be a storage room for an old corner store," my mom told me. She didn't give much thought to her answer, and neither did I. "I think they were actually talking about building on this lot soon," she added. Not that I asked. My mom always had to add something that gave her some sort of special knowledge of everything. But this is a characteristic of all grown-ups. And that was that. And Opie pooped in the lot. There was nothing to question, so from then on, any time I ran down Mollet to the baseball field, I would always take a quick glance over see the building, and think, well, there's the old storage building. And that was that. For a few years. Until one day when I was walking Hannah home from the bus stop. She was still young, only 11 by now. She stopped as we were walking, passing under the same sign on the same block of sidewalk I once stood, and asked the same question I once asked. "What's that?" she asked, pointing at the little building. "Just an old storage shed for some old building that got knocked down a while ago," I told her, without much thought. "Oh," she said. I started to walk ahead again, but she held back for a moment. "Have you ever been inside?" she asked. I began, but immediately stopped. My focus skipped over my sister and straight to the lot itself. There it was. The brick was the same red it was years ago, and the gray tile roof was as faded and slapdashed as I'd always remembered it. But it wasn't always quite like that. I took one step forward and felt the crunch of aged glass and dried dirt beneath my sneaker. The answer to her question was no, but I couldn't bring myself to say it just then. While I'd always seen them, for the first time my attention was drawn to the windows. I took another step forward, another crunch, eyes squinted through the sun. But there was no reflection shining off the windows. They'd long been rendered opaque. Permanent layers of dust obscured absolutely any daylight, sealing off view from the outside for forever. I'm still willing to bet that no one had ever actually been in there, that if I'd asked my mom again later that day, she'd have told me it was an old hot dog stand. If I asked my friend Travis's dad, he would say it was an old house from some earlier time. Parents, all grown-ups, they just always have to know. No, I've never been inside, I told Hannah at length. I just acted like I knew and didn't give it much thought after. Oh. Then Hannah continued walking home, and she never asked me about it again. Looking back on it now, I suppose there is a reason I remember these random episodes so vividly. All those years ago, I could have asked my mom what Hannah asked me. I could have refused her answer. I could have imagined what was on the other side of those brick walls, through the impenetrable glass windows. Perhaps an old man, living alone, hiding away from the world. Perhaps he'd been there for hundreds of years, just keeping a watchful eye on the town from his eons-old shack. And if anything went wrong, he would just push one button and turn back time, avoiding any disaster or cataclysm sent our way. But I didn't dream that back then. Back when I asked my mom. I just knew, and didn't care much to know. I didn't think that even when given a second chance when Hannah asked me. I just knew and didn't care much to know. And it wasn't until I was much older that I truly understood what I'd lost. And it's even more painful to know that I watched Hannah lose it too. The next day, the building wasn't there anymore. Only rubble, hidden beneath the dead sea of golden green grass. Thanks.
Alright. I will be reading from a collection of mine titled A Correspondence with Ghosts. Poems inspired by Franz Kafka's letters to Milena Jasenska. Moved and ashamed. The vigor you show in toiling incessantly over your work should be reserved for farm girls of the toughest stock. How unfortunate that the work of the mind moves out to affect the body. Limitless resolve becomes checked by the physical restraints of muscles, of lungs. Have mercy, dear lady, upon your own body as well as mine. I lack your resolve. It is my work that keeps you up at night, translating, constantly piecing each tiny fragment together, attempting to find reason in a vast, meandering dungeon of lines that run headfirst into each other, seeking an end that does not exist, an end that is not justified from a beginning, and only exists through its complete and utter deferral. Were I to stand before a trial, I would have no case to plea. The evidence that I robbed you of your sleep is enough to condemn and curse me. It is out of self-preservation that I must insist that you stop immediately. German to Czech. My eyes wish to be fastened shut. They dare opening only to receive your gentle fledgling words, but today I find ghosts instead. The phantom memories of lucid lines, once carefully nurtured and held close to my chest, now forcefully stare back at me, as abhorrent, misshapen shadows, ill-formed and filled with animus, for their premature conceptions into a dark, unforgiving world. These deciphered words, once mediators to the world of other minds, now will me into a deep isolation. My old words, once known and held close, bow elegantly to your will, mocking me, as they dance joyfully in the new authority and shimmering beauty that you have provided and shaped for them. Let my old words lay. They are but merely shadows. What I crave is beyond alive, more alive than human. Send me only your words, for hidden within each sentence are tiny, glittering fragments, more real than any hand could hold. The moon to his sea. She is dark and active as the sea, and I am dead as the moon, gazing from its cell in the sky, fascinated by her vastness and fury, as she wages constant war against the shore. I long to plummet into her depths, and be made weightless by her arms. Devoutly I wish her to crash against me and strip away my skin. The moon is jealous of a grain of sand. A not-so-simple game of chess. I am a pawn's pawn, half black, half white, unaware that the consequences of my every move are mapped out in the minds of unseen players. Knights, bishops, and castles block my path and force retreat. To move forward is certain death. I can move backwards only, into the Queen's Square, where I wait to be taken and punished accordingly.
I'll be reading 2 sections of a piece entitled Affliction. Ralph Holloway put his iPad right in front of Anna's face. He pushed up against her chair, moving it off center, causing her to type sentences like, Mitt Romney and his wife of 103 years forever. The screen was clad with smudges, some of which appeared to be food stains. His cubicle was right next to hers, and he could easily just hold it over the wall, but no, Ralph didn't like doing that. This marked casual conversation startup number 10 today. Anna did like Ralph. They would probably have lunch later on, but she could only take him in small doses. He just wasn't her type. As he continued bumping into her chair, expressing his absolute fascination over his new Nike Fit app, she tried her best to contort her neck so that her eyes would be on at least a quarter of the computer screen. She had to get this article in by 5 today. While she typed, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She let it go to voicemail thinking it was her brother asking for another loan. Finally, to get Ralph to stop blabbering, she said that she was getting a phone call and had to take it. She walked to the break room nearby and looked at her phone. Jake Mitchell had called. What? She immediately went to the bathroom down the hallway and locked herself in a stall. She needed to listen to his message in its entirety. Yo, Anna, what's going on? It's been a while. So I heard from some people that you were living in the city? Well, me and Captain Cool Kid, you remember Mac, right? Well, we're having a little fiesta or a pad next week. There's going to be a lot of kids from school there. So if you wanted to stop by, that'd be chill. We're in Long Island. Address is 250 Wilmington Place, Massapequa. We're in apartment 4B. Shindig starts at 7. All right, so maybe I'll see you. Right after she had played the message, she looked up in the corner of her phone and realized she had to be in a meeting in 30 seconds. She ran out of the bathroom and down the hallway. Ralph caught her on the way and blabbered on about his latest calorie count. From the futon, she looked at Jake. His back was against the counter while he talked to Mac. She got up. She wanted to go over to him and tap him on the shoulder and tell him that she had to leave. She rubbed her eyes and wiped under her nose, and upon looking at her glove, realized how heavily she was crying. So instead, she walked to the door nearest the futon and opened it. Luckily, it was the bathroom. She locked the door, turned on the light, and stared at herself in the mirror. She got a tissue out of her purse, dabbed her eyes, and blew her nose. She noticed how bloodshot her eyes were, like she had been digging around in them for her contacts. She looked pale, despite the olive color in her skin, and her dark circles appeared as black pits under her eyes. She put her black pointer finger on a circle under her right eye, thinking that it may just sink into it and disappear. It didn't, but the black glove against the black circle was enough to at least camouflage her finger. Maybe this is what Jake saw when he looked at her. This dead, boring, pale thing. She thought back to Ashley, the way he had held her and had pulled her into them as they danced. She remembered when they went upstairs together and he had led Ashley by the hand. She remembered him on the couch just now and how drastically his mood had changed from the beginning of the party. From that one look he had conveyed, "You're here, I see you, but I'm bored with you now and I just don't care anymore." She should be used to it, but she wasn't. Not anymore. Thank you.
I'm reading a piece from Julie Sheehan's Poetry as Metaphor course, which I wrote after she had a potter come in who gave us a bunch of clay. It's a big lump of clay, which is called a clay body, before you sort of try to make it something else. Clay body. Soft and supple, your porcelain skin. I clean you. I move your form. I add water to change the thing you're in. You tear. I mourn my mistake. Too much, too little, sometimes you break. I am told there is no such thing as the perfect amount. Of tension, of pinching, of throwing and spin, I am told that it will be magic whatever comes out. Attention put here may not yield there, but may yield a surprise. So my bowl becomes a petal, and my daughter becomes her own. In this sweltering kiln she sleeps, to emerge hardened and set in her shape. She will choose her own glaze. One day she will become frail and crack, back to the sands of our expanse, perhaps dug up again, an archaeological find, a treasure once more, as she was in my mind. Petals aside, a beautiful bowl. Thank you.
So I'm going to read a small part of the first chapter of a novel. Written. The novel is entitled Tangled Earth, and the chapter is entitled Garbage Land. Okay. Rain tapped the metal roof of Declan's shelter. His refuge, a tipped-over trash can. Squeezed and huddled in a ball, he tapped back with a pointed finger. Sleep not immediately available, and nothing else to pit his mind against. He staked out this place before the others, whenever storms seemed as if they would reach an agitated roar, being a bit more spacious than the usual city receptacle. Mostly, he ignored these gusts of earthly tantrums. On this night, a recipe of rain and chill swept across the paved tracks of shadowed alleyways and vacant sidewalks, ice slippery underfoot. A typical fall day in New York City, while summer and winter still negotiated. Enough to persuade him to take this refuge. For the most part, Declan concerned himself with staying amongst the living. So, when the rain stuck to his beard like chunks of diamonds in a briar patch, he staked out this trash can early, before the severity of night could arrive. As for him, well, Declan forgot out of habit why he forsook the conveniences of the civilized. This suited him, directionless and unable to assimilate, as if he was born on a foreign world. He preferred this self-imposed title of outcast. He pursued homelessness like a trade, learning the social dynamics with peers and outsiders alike. With vigor, he challenged the lack of food, warmth, sleep, and even the occasional city vulture, usually a knife-wielding youth driven to assert dominance, and a life otherwise powerless. These obstacles gave him a year of mental respite once he broke loose from the academic servitude of Columbia as an aimless student dabbling in Mesopotamian anthropology and even horticulture of the Venus flytrap variety. On most days, the concrete wall of a skyscraper served as backing to his imagined throne. He lounged against it to observe passing eyes avert his gaze. He figured to them he lacked significance, a speck of dust along their path, or at best a rat scuttling to a drainage hole. Not always, but now Declan walked the earth, like the shadow of smoke. Barely visible, never really there. The downpour insisted he turn nocturnal, bombarding his roof like little watery rockets. He stuck his head out, long neck straining so the rain might fill his mouth. He gulped, the tinge of acid from fumigated skies, almost a spice to him now. Declan reclaimed his cover, wiped his lips with a stained sleeve, not sure of its original color, nor caring to know. He enjoyed the angry skies, understanding Earth used it much like we do our senses, to discern and express. When it expelled water from the heavens, the planet spoke in a manner of speaking. Declan tasted the message in the subtle burn along the rim of his mouth. He sympathized with its plight, and somehow he knew it reciprocated, as if it discovered his secret, but saw nothing less of him for it. Spitting out the metallic tang, he allowed the continued patter of rain to calm him. Taking in the seconds with a pleased grin, he slid his tongue along the ridge of his lips, clearing it of saliva. Time taught him the earth spoke to those willing to listen. On that day it said, "I'm alive, I'm alive," as if defying man's attempts at subjugation. During such storms, society silenced long enough to allow the world a moment to be heard. As to the stability of his mental faculties, they were always in question. Having no mode or logic to base his experiences on, a year or so ago, Declan declared himself insane. His primary reason for abandoning college for the streets. Who knew? Maybe he would find someone else like him in this world of the homeless.
This is a piece that was written in Melissa Banks' memoir class. When you live with this boyfriend, you don't actually live with him. You inhabit the space around his things. You hide your toothbrush behind his laptop, your books in the crook between his bed and the wall, and your shoes in his closet. When you live with this boyfriend, you keep your belongings in a suitcase by the door, ready to leave at a moment's notice. Maybe it's because you don't really live with him, or maybe it's because you are waiting for this boyfriend to cheat on you again, or kick you out, or ignore you more than he already does. Your dog's leash rests on the couch, your keys hang from his doorknob, your jacket already sits in the car. 3 boys and 3 dogs live in a 900 square foot house. They are all alcoholics, even the St. Bernard. She is nursing an injury from jumping out of the back of her owner's truck, and her owner is too lazy to take her to the vets. There are stacks of beer cans on the bar counter. This boyfriend doesn't own a kitchen table. And bottles and cans wedged in between stained hair and drool-covered couches that used to have a cute blue with small flowers pattern on them before he decided to bring them into his house. You don't drink, at least not until you live with this boyfriend. Then you drink to help tolerate his drinking, and you cry when you can't. You drink sometimes when he comes home from work because you have nothing to talk about. You drink sometimes to pretend it's okay to be drunk every night. One time, you drink and cry when he doesn't stand up for you when his white roommate from South Carolina says that he is not a nigger, knowing your dad is black. One time, you drink and cry when he starts a fight with a guy that gets too close to you. No one is allowed to touch you, but everyone is allowed to hurt you. The bathroom of your boyfriend's house is the color of your heart. There's a stack of Playboys on the counter by one of the sinks. The spines aren't cracked, the pages are hardly thumbed. They are mostly there as a joke, next to the parenting magazines his roommate was subscribed to as a prank by some unknown party. When you live with this boyfriend, you play shoot, screw, and marry with the naked women in the magazine. It's one of the only ways you communicate. You always pick the same women. The alcohol and the dog hair take up more room than you do. Tufts of St. Bernard stick to every surface, including walls, glued there by the drool of the neglected pet. She bites at your heels. She attacks your dog. Yet there are minuscule signs that you coexist with these people. The soap in the bathroom smells like fresh rain. You've pulled the comforter up to cover your boyfriend's bed because he doesn't believe in sheets since his feet get claustrophobic. You've stacked some of his books so they aren't balanced precariously around shoes, weights, and dirty laundry. And you are always sitting in the same spot on the futon waiting for him to arrive home, praying that this time he actually sees you, wishing to be enveloped by his presence rather than knocking at the door to his thoughts, trying to see what color his heart is through his eyes. If only you had known that the color of his heart is the sly deception of a gin and tonic with lime. You think you know what it is, but you are wrong. It is not water. It will not nourish you. If you had known that, maybe you wouldn't have lived with this boyfriend.
Okay, I'm going to read 2 poems. The first came out of the Uses of Affliction class. That's Monday nights in Manhattan. Yeah. Thank you, Magdalene. It's an awesome class. So we read Fenton Johnson's memoir, Geography of the Heart, which is about losing his partner to AIDS in 1990. This is a found poem taken from that novel, and it's called Man with Flowers. One measure of love is the ability to speak aloud the unspeakable, when to cling and when to let go, on the couch or in the kitchen. We were oblivious to the weather then, alone in that room, with enormous burdens of love. The silence was a living thing. This is memory's tragedy, so much stage play. I could not yet begin to fathom that I had been spared. My balled fist held years of denial and desire and hiding, the insatiable hunger of my fury. All that history has to go somewhere, he said, all that energy of grief. But death was constantly the third party, an indifferent chain-smoking doctor in drag, his lavender suspenders and fake leopard skin pants, too significant to ignore. I have learned we can't know everything. Each rain we give away some part of ourselves, loaves and fishes, grateful, consumed with the jagged black space at the edge of perfection prolonged. Thanks. Okay, and the second and last poem, this was written as part of Julie's aphorism in the public space, part of her poetry as metaphor class. So the last two lines in this poem were made into a plaque that I left at Boss Tweed, that the 19th century politician's grave in Brooklyn. It's called Boss Tweed. A friend among poor and friendless, the New York County Sheriff said. A fine forefather of the handshake with unprincipled contract men. Justified, he stole from city coffers to stuff his voters' palates, extended lucrative employment to protect his mouthy ballot. The presiding king of corruption, the routine special deal, his expiration undignified at the Ludlow Street Jail. History's cruel to the greedy, these fat rulers of public space, the men for whom special favors are excused and commonplace. Yet Tweed was alone when he passed, degraded and embarrassed, his daughter out fetching tea, his wife fleeing to Paris. There was no flag at half-staff, no newspaper elegy, just acacia on his grave at Greenwood Cemetery. While the New York Public Library he founded secured land for the Upper East Side. He was in the end just another politician, sullied by hubris and the bribe.
Even the simplest of phrases carries with it unspoken cargo, connotations, both intentional and otherwise, words beyond words. For example, saying you've gotten lost tends to imply that someone somewhere might be looking for you, but I ask you only to suspend that implied idea for a moment of your time as I explain the particulars of my substanceless subsistence, adrift in a world of chosen careers and family values and close and personal relationships with God. Perhaps I'd do better to get to the physical crux of my affliction. I found it impossible to talk on my cellular phone without getting lost. I can't talk on my cell phone because I don't have a proper cell phone charger. Only one of the ones that plugs into my car as a faux cigarette lighter. That was the only one they had at the store, you see, and it's a matter of principle now that if I paid for this hunk of wires with my 30 American dollars, e pluribus unum forever and ever, amen, I'm going to make good use of what I purchased. Anyway, my business partner, who wears a lot of makeup around her eyes, nothing unprofessional, you understand, but it's a bit much, and she wears no lipstick or anything on the rest of her face, which looks fairly strange, and I don't know why she does it. Anyway, she has advised me to do a number of things, but most often and most insistently to go to the parking garage when I have some free time and just start the car up and charge my phone to the maximum with the door or window open while reading a book or perhaps a tasteful magazine. She says, who knows, maybe you can read some edgy poetry book and pick up a hipster girl at a bar tonight. God knows there are enough of them around here. Ha 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 ha, and snorts after she is done saying this. I do not know if she means there are enough hipster girls or enough bars or enough edgy poetry books. I do know she is mocking me because I like to read and talk and think about the things I've read, and being well read is not particularly useful in our line of work. Also, maybe she is mocking me for being in my late 30s and single ever since the separation period that turned into a separation period, but I am not sure she is that mean-spirited. Scratch that, she says. Ha ha ha. There's a Starbucks around the corner. Just park your car in the front and start reading out loud. They'll flock to you like pigeons to a crust of bread. Ha ha. That is the way she laughs. She says the words ha 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 instead of making a real laugh like real people. It makes me want to distrust her, even though I know she is very level-headed and usually a nice person, but something about that laugh is off-putting. I wonder if it is conscious or unconscious, and if it is unconscious, is it hereditary, or did she learn it from a friend, or did it just somehow come from her brain to her mouth, which is really the most frightening possibility of all, because people are not supposed to say their laughs, but then again, people are not supposed to read so much into laughter. As I have said, I read quite a lot. I don't want to do what she says, though, because contrary to popular belief, and by popular I mean my business partner, and that is pretty much it, it is not very comfortable or natural to sit in your car with the engine running and the door open while reading. I can imagine the sort of looks I would get. Looks that say, "What the hell are you doing, man? Close the door. I need to get my car out of here, and while you're at it, get a new muffler. This is noise pollution. I ought to call the cops on you right now," except I don't really want to follow through with filing a police report, and I'd really rather you just stopped reading and stopped sitting with your door open, and in short, stopped unnerving me with your empty eyes and fraying suit, and just gotten your piece of junk and went, man. Just went, and I don't care where. Just get out of my sight, and get a little sense while you're at it. Get a little knowledge of how to reasonably participate in society, because you look like the sort of man who doesn't have that knowledge. You look like the sort of man who ought to be locked up, and you know I probably should, and I would be pretty okay with that, because shit, they let you write in prison and read, plus you can eat and sleep, and I am not sure what else I was put here to do except reproduce, and I already did that twice, and the products hate me a little for who and what I am, and the Factor hates me a lot for similar, if not the same reasons, and our dinner times tables were full of loud silences and averted eyes, and I do not know how to fix that. Anyway, I have a really dreadful feeling that now that I've started getting lost, I won't ever be able to stop, even if or when my phone is ever fully charged. Once you start something like this and really commit yourself to it, there's no way out. Okay.
All right, I have 3 short pieces to read. The first is entitled, "That One Time Constantine Went to Nirvana." 11:07 p.m. He sniffed the paper, wondering if he'd be able to smell the acid or not. He couldn't smell anything, so he put the paper on his tongue and stood there waiting for something to happen. When nothing happened, he went into the bathroom and started to pick at his face, popping pimples and staring at the pus in the mirror, moving his tongue methodically from side to side inside his mouth the whole time. 11:40 p.m. Constantine turns on the hot water in the bath, then walks into the kitchen where he pours himself a tall glass of water from the tap. 11:47 p.m. Back in the bathroom. Constantine looks at the empty tub inquisitively before dropping the plug into the drain. 11:55 p.m. His shoes and socks are off. The tub is half full, and Constantine is at the sink wetting a hand towel in cold water, soaking it and wringing it consecutively. The sound of the tub reminds him of what he imagines it sounds like to stand behind a very small waterfall. He imagines standing behind a very small waterfall. He wants to be like this forever. 12:05 a.m. His shirt and pants are off. So is the water. Constantine puts his foot at the threshold, and a zap of electricity spins up his skin into one ear and out the other. He lowers himself slowly into the hot water, displacing it, and takes a deep breath of hot steam. 12:21 a.m. Constantine drinks the glass of water in one long gulp, and it moves like a waterfall, coolly and wet down his esophagus into his belly. He puts the cold washcloth on his forehead. 12:46 a.m. He looks at his hands. They are raisin-like, soaked and wrinkled, and feel alien to him. 1:01 a.m. Constantine sat up, turned himself 90 degrees in the tub as if he were a perpendicular line crossing the short distance between the long sides. He straightened his back against the wall, tucked his knees against the tub for support, dropped his arms to his sides, and then he closed his eyes. Second piece is called Country Club. They dragged all 3 generations, kicking and screaming out of their crude mud, brick, wood home in the middle of the night, torches raised above their heads, blowing off smoke like some sacrifice to a primitive god, and marched them from the reservation to the town center. The woman accusing rape sat on a tree trunk, wet-eyed, wrapped in black, clutching a newborn baby, one shade too dark to pass. The men formed a horseshoe, open to her, their confused captor in the middle. "Savage," a man yelled. It was her husband. Charging his way through the porous line, rifle raised, pulling the trigger, blowing the man's head clean off his shoulders while his wife, mother, and child watched. Then they raised the burial ground and built a golf course on top. And for my last piece, I'm going to call up our next reader, the lovely and talented Miss Holly Weinberg. She's going to help me with this. This piece is called A Poor Man and His Wife Eat Thanksgiving Dinner. "Darling,"
he said,
"we haven't enough money for a turkey,"
"nor for cranberries,
she said.
or stuffing bread.
"We could always boil some potatoes and mash them with a fork,
That would be lovely.
though we haven't any butter or milk to make them creamy the way you like.
Let us give thanks, then, for potatoes,"
And darling,
he said.
we haven't enough money to exchange gifts for Hanukkah or for Christmas.
Is there still no work?
Still no work.
Oh no.
Well, we have made the rent,
And we have a bed,
and it's cold and rainy.
and soon there will be snow and no work.
Let us feast on each other then. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm it, and then you can go home. I will be reading 3 very, very short poems. Today's color palette. I've been training myself to live in a painting. If you squeeze me, art comes out like suds from a sponge. I've been working on it since I was 12. It's just a feeling I can't alter. It is like train travel. It is like time travel. Max when he looks in my eyes. His spirit is a shapeshifter. He's a painter. I sat on a couch in a kibbutz. He sat across from me and told me to look in his eyes while he drew me. I vibrate quicker when the pencil hits the paper. Faults begin to shift. Maybe that's why I'm shaking. A tunnel forms. There's light between our faces. And I don't know if my body gets wet or my soul gets wet, but anytime he looks in my eyes, I want to tear him a little apart. The 2 worst things. I dreamt I worked in a Nazi prison camp. I filled out forms on a typewriter. The 2 worst things in the world: genocide and paperwork. Thank you. That's it.